the work world confusing? Congested? Are you just trying to find your way? There must be a light at the end of this tunnel. Well, there's a way to find your calling, to find that job you want and deserve, when someone will come up to you and say, "You're hired." Hi, I'm Steve Piazzale, a career and life coach, and welcome to You're Hired, a show about jobs and careers in which we answer questions such as, how do I find work that makes me come alive? How do I get that job I want and deserve? How do I work more effectively cross-culturally? Well, we answer such questions by having on each show knowledgeable, lively guests, and we certainly have one today. Before I introduce her, though, I'd like to invite you to check out my website where you'll find the 12 keys of getting a great job. You can sign up for my free career newsletter there. You can watch past episodes of the show and find out about the career coaching I do. And essentially what I do is work with people one-on-one to help them get unstuck, define their goals, and reach them faster than they would on their own. That's all at www.bayareacareercoach.com. Again, www.bayareacareercoach.com. Well, I want to welcome Melissa Lamson to the show. I want to read all this. She has a lot of qualifications. She's president and CEO of Lamson Consulting, is a thought leader and sought-after consultant who accelerates the goal of today's global business executives. She's recently authored a book, which we'll show you in a moment, Cultural Transformation Tweet. It's chock full of wisdom from diverse business leaders, and she's here to talk to us about working in a cross-cultural world. Melissa, welcome to the show.
Thank you very much, Steve, for having me.
So tell us what you do and the interesting path you took to getting there.
Yes. So I do cross-cultural consulting, is sort of the traditional way of putting it, but I really help global executives understand what are the behaviors that they need and their people need to be able to work successfully across cultures in different countries in global expansion. And I came to this 18 years ago, which seems so long, but I came to it because I grew up really in a multicultural world, and it was really exciting for me to be able to have the opportunity to travel to different countries, to hear different languages, to really enjoy being with people from other cultures. And I always had that curiosity. And when I jumped into this field, I started with doing a master's in intercultural relations.
Oh, really?
I did that at Lesley University. And at that time, it was really one of the only programs that existed in the U.S. for this topic. And it was a combination of economics, anthropology, sociology, very research-based. And I learned really, how do you analyze and then understand and all of the cross-cultural theory that there is to learn. And then through my business, I just get the hands-on experience by traveling to different countries. So I've done projects mostly with multinationals in over 40 or so countries around the world, in places like South Africa and Brazil and China.
Wow.
And it's been really, really exciting.
So you've been able to meld your passion in a way with your background and your career all in one.
Yes. Yes. I feel very lucky to have been able to do that.
You truly love your work.
I love my work. Yep. I meet so many interesting people, and when you get that aha effect where people go, wow, now I understand how to communicate easier, or how people can understand each other, or wow, they really weren't being a jerk. They were just trying to be normal and I misunderstood it.
Do you feel like you're making a difference in your own way? I mean, that you're able to put people in situations where they can talk to each other and break down barriers between?
I really hope so. I know that it is the case, it is the impact, but I hope that people feel that it makes a difference. It's amazing. I mean, you can't even really put a number on it, which is what makes it difficult. How much money do you save if people can communicate well? But as soon as you ask any business executive or business leader today, so how much would it mean to you if people could communicate better and understand each other and feel good about coming to work and working with people from all different backgrounds? They go, oh well, actually, we'd pay a lot to have that work out well.
Mm-hmm.
Right?
So they can't quantify it, but they know it's darn important.
Yeah.
So let's get out your book here and show it to the audience, and maybe you can tell us a little bit more about it. Cultural Transformation, Business Advice on Agility and Communication Across Cultures. And let's see if I can get this where everybody can see it. But tell us what's in the book. And
cultural transformation is kind of an abstract phrase, but it's kind of a sexy buzzword, but it's really, it does mean, how do I understand today's business needs, and how do I make sure that my organization is not only changing or modifying what it's been doing before, but how do we really look at transformation in our approach to the world, in our approach to the global economy today. And so I sort of broke it down into a few different areas which I think are most important, and that was how are we flexible and agile in terms of working across cultures? What does it mean in terms of leadership? What is the role of a leader today? I mean, as we know, we're moving. I mean, being based in Mountain View, you probably see it hands-on, but you really see that we're moving from a hierarchical structure to a much more flatter kind of system within organizations today. And so people are working really strictly in teams. It's not so much that they're reporting up the lines anymore.
So they're more peers, is that?
Exactly, exactly. And trying to do that globally is really challenging. And so that's one of the topics that I discuss in the book, and especially just plain old communication. What does that mean, and how is that different or unique when you're doing that across cultures?
So we don't have it here, but you also have a book on Germany. Is that what it is?
Yes, on German business culture. Yes.
So switching gears just a bit here, interviewing is so crucial. As I'm coaching people, making it through an interview is the gateway to the jobs, right? And can you provide some tips for the audience when they're interviewing cross-culturally, maybe primarily from the point of view of the person being interviewed, but also a person trying to interview somebody else? Can you talk a little bit about that? What kind of tips, advice would you give?
Sure. Yeah, no, this is a big topic. So I work on this in both angles. So sometimes a company will bring me in to look at, from the recruiting side, how do we actually develop the interview strategies or policies, or how are we going to do that successfully, not only in the United States, but also when we do that abroad. So for example, I worked with a company where they were trying to expand in Brazil, and they just sent out job descriptions, and the job description said new business evangelist. And it happened to be a North American company based in North America. And they said, isn't that a great title, like New Business Evangelist? And they sent it to Brazil, and they thought, we'll get thousands of people because there's all these people that need jobs, and we're going to expand like gangbusters. And they didn't get one response to this job posting. And then they were really confused, and they called me and said, Melissa, I think we need to revamp the strategy and this and that, and we know you're an expert in this. Could you help us? And the first thing I said was, well, you can't say the word evangelist.
That's what I was thinking. It might be
in a title word. I mean, there's some things that are almost so simple, but you don't think about it. You're working in
was that offensive?
In your own world.
It was offensive. Religious leader?
Yeah, you couldn't go home and show your mom your business card and say, "Hi, Mom, I'm a new business evangelist." Your mom would slap you across the face. What do you mean, evangelist?
Mm-hmm.
That's just for Sundays. So. That was something simple, but something simple like that causes, obviously huge downtime when they don't get the employees they need to be able to expand. So in terms of interviewing, we look at everything from the strategy piece also down to the nitty-gritty interviews. And as you know, in the U.S., it's if I help the international companies in terms of interviews in the U.S. context, there are lots of things you can't say and can say in terms of ask what you ask. And then also from the person who's being interviewed standpoint, if people are coming especially to the Bay Area or to an area like anywhere on the coast really, things are so fast paced and people are really looking to hire quickly and get a lot of people in the door. And if you're coming from a culture which moves a little bit more slowly or is very relationship oriented, being interviewed in the U.S. can be really scary in a way because the questions are very sharp, they're very on point. I mean, the interviews go 15 minutes, 20 minutes. You have little or no small talk. And in many cultures, it's who you know and how well you relate is going to still get you the job, right? And so here in the U.S., it's really, tell me just the bullet points. What do you know? Where were you educated? What's your 5-year plan? Now it's probably more like a year-long plan, but you would know that better than I would. So it's very quick, it's very sharp, and I think a lot of people need to come in prepared with those types of questions. And I would certainly work with a coach such as yourself to be able to prepare yourself for those kinds of interviews.
Yeah, we role play some of those things, but there's
That's
also
critical.
maybe you have a comment on this difficulty in that we really believe in phone screens now. So the only modality you have is the person's voice, and if they're coming at you rapidly, that must create some problems of people understanding, if nothing else.
Yeah. I mean, it's, today, we work in a world where not everyone speaks English. English is, or perfectly, I should say. I mean, English is the business language. Maybe in 10 years it might be Mandarin or maybe Arabic. I don't know. But today it's English, and not everyone necessarily is a native English speaker. And this makes it complicated, particularly on the phone, because when you can't read lips. I know for myself, when I was learning German, it was really important for me to be able to read someone's lips when they're speaking so that I could really get the full context of what they're saying. But when you're doing that over the phone, particularly if it's quick and if you're using slang, and also business terminology is completely different across cultures, this can be complicated.
And you can't pick up any of the nonverbal cues to help you. You know, it's not your native, well, if it's cross-cultural, it's probably not your first language. It's coming at you rapid fire.
Right.
And you can't take the body cue. So do you think mainly, I mean, I don't mean to focus on me, but that they should role play ahead of time?
Definitely.
Working with somebody that would be asking them sharp questions so they get that pacing down?
Absolutely. Definitely. And I think that's really critical for the person who's going to be interviewing for jobs. But I think we need to get much more savvy. Especially in the U.S., we need to really become good at being sensitive to doing those interviews, to interviewing the people that we want in our organizations. I mean, there's a talent war out there, and it's only going to get, worse or better depending on how you look at it. And so we need to accommodate that as well, and not look at it like, oh, everybody should sort of adjust to the way we do an interview. Yeah. Because we want them. I mean, we want that expertise. Just because their English isn't perfect doesn't mean that they aren't super brains, right? Yeah. And going to bring a lot of value to the organization.
Or maybe send somebody ahead to see what does the word evangelist mean in Brazil. You know what I mean? Have somebody like you who's an expert figure out, this is going to be offensive, or if you run a campaign. Because I imagine that would happen too.
Oh yeah, marketing campaigns is a big part of my job. So I look through tons of slides or pictures or photos, copy, just to make sure that everything is sort of makes sense. I had one company which they did their whole website in English. They were a European-based firm, and they did the English version of the website, and that 90% of their customer base is in the U.S. They did their website in Irish English. So as an American, when you were reading Irish English, I mean, there were words in there I had never heard of, right? And then they had a mascot on the website, which was which was a ladybug, right? Like visual picture of a ladybug for luck, meaning good luck, which we sort of know in the U.S. But the funny thing is that they call a ladybug a ladybird in Ireland. So they got hundreds of emails from their U.S. customers before they launched it and before they came to me. And they got hundreds of emails saying, ladybird is spelled wrong, it's actually ladybug. I mean, how embarrassing, right? I mean, and they were a medical devices company. It really, it impacts your, how you're seen in terms of your level of competence too. So you really have to double check all that.
So shifting gears a little bit, let's start talking about working in a cross-cultural team. What are some of the obstacles, challenges of working, not managing, we'll get to that in a second, but in working in a...
In working in a team, we just spoke about it. I mean, really have to be conscientious of how you're speaking the language, making sure that you're not using too much slang, etc., so that you can make yourself understood. I really like this kind of what's called a systemic way of getting feedback. So you say something and then you ask for people to give you kind of a summary of what you said, so that you know that there's been an understanding, which is helpful. You really have to watch the meanings behind words. We sometimes jokingly say, and it's very true, that in the U.S., if you do a big presentation in front of a group of people and they say, wow, that was really interesting afterwards, you can basically go, hang yourself, because they probably were horribly bored, right?
Oh, because they said it was interesting.
Right. They would say, oh, it's excellent, it was fantastic. Let's say we use that language in the U.S. Where in Europe, if they say, wow, that was really interesting, you can take that as a really solid compliment. On a scale from 1 to 10, it was probably a 9, 10 being the best, something like that. So you want to watch the meanings behind words when you're working across cultures and in teams. And also just making sure that you're asking for input from the different members, particularly if that team is spread out around the world. You're going to want to make sure that whatever you're trying to roll out or work on is relevant to where that team member is located. So if let's say it's a new product development, is that product going to be relevant to the Chinese market? Is it relevant to the Brazilian market? Is it relevant to the South African market? And that team member is really the person who can bring that knowledge to the work. So before you get all into this sort of group think about developing something or working on a particular project or process or policy, make sure that you're really asking for input. So this is what we're thinking. Does this make sense?
Yeah, it seems related to the next question. I mean, it seems very similar. Tips for managing cross-culturally, and we have a graphic that will show the audience. I thought I'd read the bullet points, but it sounds like it's very, very close to how to work well in a group is also in part how to manage well, but let's go through the points.
Yes.
You say, speak clearly and avoid slang with non-native speakers. You were starting to say that already, but go ahead and elaborate on that a little more.
I mean, especially if you are a native English speaker and you're the manager, you want to make sure that you're speaking slowly and clearly as much as possible. I know it's difficult because if you have some folks who are much faster in terms of the way they receive information, they might get a little restless, but try to accommodate for both styles when you can in a team.
Okay. It also says, this is from your book as well, understand that the meanings behind words may be different than the words themselves.
Right, that has to do with interesting. Another fun example is when someone says no problem. So when you ask for a deliverable and they say, oh sure, no problem. What does that mean? Does that mean I have a 10% chance of getting it? Does it mean a 100% chance? It's 50-50? And what's the system behind it? Do I need to follow up with them? Are they going to come back to me? Do I just wait and see if they deliver it? So this is really different across cultures, and I talk a lot about that in the workshops I do. I do a workshop called Innovation from Cross-Cultural Teamwork.
Oh, that sounds fascinating.
Probably the majority of what we talk about is this, how do I get deliverables and get commitment across cultures?
Okay. Account for time zones and be flexible.
Yeah, it seems so simple, but you know, especially with meeting requests, you'll send a meeting request based on your own time zone or a time that works for you, right? Whoever calls the meeting, particularly the manager. If they call the meeting, they say, okay, yeah, 1 p.m. PST, that works, right? And then, you know, of course, it's late in the evening in Europe, and you know, I think really early in the morning in other parts of the world, and you know, obviously getting later on the East Coast, even here in the United States. And you really want to make sure that you're not asking everyone to be flexible and wake up at crazy hours, or you know, or go to bed at crazy hours in terms of the time zone. But to kind of, typically what the best practice is that you alternate time zones. So you say, well, now we're going to do it, you know, 3 p.m. your time.
Okay.
And then we'll do it 11 a.m. your time, and so we'll make sure that it's reasonable for everyone, and then not so comfortable other times for folks. But I can't tell you how many times I'm expected to get up at 3 o'clock in the morning and be on phone calls or even teach courses online.
It seemed like you're awake.
Right. I'm usually pretty good.
And then you say learn about cultural expectations in communication.
Yeah. It surprises me, it's still very underestimated. 70% of our behavior, according to the research, is based on our cultural background. And we communicate all the time based on what we believe is cultural, you know, our cultural values and what we believe is culturally appropriate. And we don't even know that it is our cultural values or what's culturally appropriate because it's so normal for us, right? So our normal is going to be someone else's completely, you know, odd, you know. And so other people will operate from their normalness and we operate from ours, and sometimes there's a clash. And people still underestimate that gravely in the workplace. And so just to take a little bit of time to take a workshop, get a little bit of coaching, even read a book about what those cultural differences are, it'll make a big difference.
You know, I remember when I was working in the corporate world that non-native speakers would think that Americans spent too much time joking around. Like before a meeting, one of the ways to make things relax is to joke around and talk about sports and all this stuff and use a bunch of slang, and these people would be lost and would say, I wish they'd stop talking about this and just get down to business. How do you run a group and make it friendly and kind of American-like, but at the same time respect that somebody's not going to understand half this humor that you're using?
Right, right.
How do you balance that?
Yeah. I mean, I think when working internationally, if you want to create a standard, I think to err on the side of being a bit more formal, do a few sentences of small talk, but not necessarily, jokes or using slang, but just kind of asking people how they are, how their trip was, particularly if you've all come in from different global locations. But it's really important. You lose credibility very quickly as an American if you come into a meeting particularly with business partners from parts of Asia and also Europe. People just say, "Wow, who is this clown?" And you can usually do that sort of later on in the meeting once you've established credibility. So to allow for small talk at lunch breaks or at coffee breaks or even at the end of the day. I mean, often we come in, we do a little bit of small talk, we get the business done, and then we all go our separate ways at the end of the day. But in Europe and also Asia, it's really important to have that evening time because that's the social time, that's the relationship building time. And the USers, we all go back to our hotel rooms at like 8 o'clock at night and go, okay, I'll just order room service and that's good enough. But stick with it and do the social stuff. That's when it'll happen. But yes, it is important to come in a little bit more formal in the beginning.
How about different cultures? Do you have to approach things differently depending on what culture the person comes from, or? If
it's not a mixed group and it's you're going into an environment which is more monocultural, I guess you could say. Yeah, sure. I mean, in Europe, you'll want to dress a bit more formally. You'll want to come in prepared with data and facts and lots of figures, particularly if you're in a country like Germany. They really like to see that you have a lot of materials before you move on to the results orientation. I mean, in the US, we usually speak from a much more results oriented perspective, and then we kind of collaborate on the details after the fact. In Asia, they also really prefer to have a more formal presentation so that they have, and they like to have the handouts as well as being able to listen to you speak so that they can kind of follow along and translate and interpret what the meaning is of the materials that you've brought. So it's interesting. I guess I would say, with the exception of Latin America or maybe Southern Europe, business is a little more formal in most parts of the world in terms of preparation level and etiquette.
Well, how about if you're running a team and it's in the United States, but they're diverse and they're coming from different cultures? Do you run the meeting kind of formally, but then treat them one-on-one more according to their culture and go after that? Is that?
Yeah. I mean, in that case, I would definitely set the expectations and say, well, you could even take a few minutes out and say, what have you noticed about working in the U.S. that might be different from working in your own culture?
This is one-on-one, you're saying?
Yeah, you could do that one-on-one, or even as a group. Like, take 5 minutes in the beginning of a meeting. Say you're kicking off a project team, and they're all from different countries originally, and they're together working maybe for the first time. You might say, hey, what have you noticed that's a little bit different about working in the U.S., and how might it be different from where you're from, so that we can get some information about that, so we can apply it and leverage that for the good of our work together in this team. And have an open conversation, set expectations about what are the ground rules that we're going to do here, how formal or informal are we going to be. And then definitely, especially for those cultures who are a little bit more uncomfortable with direct feedback, especially criticism, or constructive criticism, I should say, really important that you do individual check-ins. So I say, if you have a meeting once a week in person, make sure that you touch base with every individual in that team at least once a week in addition to that meeting. Okay.
I wanted to just take a moment to read I don't know how much time we'll have, but a tweet or two from the book, and just have you comment on it. You say, sometimes what people don't say is more powerful than what they actually say. Can you comment on that? As a hidden truth or something?
Yeah. Well, there are many cultures. I mean, I think Japan is one of the best examples where a lot of communication is nonverbal. And so the expressions that they're using in their face and what they're not saying is something, can be even, in some cases, more powerful or more important than what they might be saying. And if you don't understand those cues in terms of the nonverbal communication, then it's difficult to really understand. Wait, do they agree? Do they not agree? Do they understand me? Are they excited about the project? Are they not? And you would know all that, obviously, if you're from Japan or you know Japanese culture well.
Okay. Another one that I liked was be curious every single day about the people you work with. Seek to understand the uniqueness of individual backgrounds and experiences.
Yeah.
Talk a little about that, about being curious every single day.
Yeah, that actually came from one of the managers at SAP, because I had a lot of different companies contribute tweets to the book too, and I that one stuck out to me too, and I thought, oh, that's such great advice, particularly for leaders. I think sometimes we get very focused on the task, and we're very high pressure, and there's a lot of, a lot of time is going into the actual stuff we've got to get done, and just if we can just take a few moments, just still remain curious and still kind of check in with people and say, hey, I'm interested in you as a person, I find you fascinating, I'd like to learn more about you. It will dramatically increase the results of just the cooperation and the level of engagement you'll have of your talent. Right, and I think, and as I said, this is as you know, is one of the most challenging issues for companies today, is just keeping good talent that they want to keep, and part of that is feeling valued as a human being, not only as someone who's just really great at the task. Right.
Okay, and there was one more. This really fits with coaching. Make sure the job fits. Productivity goes hand in hand with job satisfaction.
Yeah. I mean, I think it's important to ask people and assess, where are your strengths and your qualifications to be able to be a productive team member. So that's very important, and I think that's also underestimated. Especially some people will say, well, they're fluent in this particular language, so I think this will work, or they've got really great IT skills, so they should work on this project. But maybe they don't realize that they could also leverage their social skills, or they could leverage their cultural abilities or something else, not only language or technical skills.
So we have less than a minute. Is there something we haven't mentioned that you would like to mention, or something you'd like to reinforce that you've already said?
Well, I think the reason why this topic of understanding culture and working across cultures successfully is so important is that there have just been recent studies that have come out that said that today leaders are most concerned with, do their people have a global mindset? And are they able to work successfully globally? And we won't be able to do that if we don't understand how people think and work and what their expectations are globally. So to be able, as much as you can do to develop your global mindset will make you a valued contributor to any organization you want to work with today.
Okay, Melissa, thank you for being on the show.
Thanks very much, Steve.
There's much more to cover. We've got to have you back again.
Appreciate it. Thank you.
And thank you for watching You're Hired. If you have any input for us about this show, suggestions for future shows, or questions about jobs and careers, feel free to contact me at steve@bayareacareercoach.com. That's steve@bayareacareercoach.com. Do check out the website. You can find out about the career coaching I do. You can access the contact information of everybody who's ever been on the show. And yours is lamsonconsulting.com, right? Mm-hmm. Or Twitter, okay. And mine is www.bayareacareercoach.com. That's www.bayareacareercoach.com. Thank you very much for watching, and we'll catch you next time on You're Hired. And thank you so much for being on You're Hired.
It was a pleasure.